Okay, so I think, are we filling up the room now with plenty of folks here for the Franchisor Forum webinar on franchisee expectations versus reality? Okay, I am assuming there are lots of folks coming in. Can't see them yet. I only see Laura and I only see us. Is everybody in?
Yes, if you go to the attendees tab, you should see 35.
Perfect. So we're excited to have you join us. I'm Robin Gagnon. I'm the chair of the Franchisor Forum. And this is a continuation of a wonderful super session that we held at the IFA conference in February. And if you are familiar with the work of Greg Nathan and the E Factor book that he wrote a few years ago, he talks about the stages of franchising. And that very first stage is Glee. So you remember that first moment when that franchisee signs up, they're all smiles, they're full of energy, super ready to crush it, and then we come up against reality. But we're going to pretend that doesn't happen because we have some amazing experts with us today that I trust and respect so much in this industry. They're going to share their insights on how we actually keep that Glee stage going. And it begins with how we set some expectations and really lay that out over the course of the franchise agreement. So I'm going to ask each of our presenters our panelists to first introduce themselves, and I will begin with Clarissa Bradstock. Clarissa?
Great. Thank you, Robin. First, I want to say it is such an honor to be here today. Again, my name is Clarissa Bradstock. I am the CEO of Any Lab Test Now. Started with Any Lab Test Now when we started franchising as the Chief Operating Officer, became the acting CEO and then CEO in 2014. And we also recently did a joint venture with our competitor back in August of 2024, started a joint venture. We've got a platform brand now called Cresso Brands, and I'm a board member with Cresso Brands. Really excited to talk about this topic. And with that, I will hand it over to Jason.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I was just going to jump in and say, and I apologize, I shouldn't have stepped over you, Clarissa. Thank you for handing off to Jason. Jason's joining us from Dairy Queen. And so I am super excited to know. So we're going from one type of brand to another, how you retain everyone at that Glee stage. So take it away, Jason. Tell us about your background and experience. And I won't get in the middle. I'll let you pass the torch to Larisa next.
All right. Thanks for the invitation. I'm super happy to be here with everybody. I'm the Director of Development Operations at American Dairy Queen, and in my role, I get the opportunity to work with operations consultants who onboard new franchisees and open new DQ restaurants throughout the United States. My team and I are responsible for operational excellence and overall franchisee success, and I've been with Dairy Queen since 2013. Prior to that, I was with a number of different roles with Yum Brands.
Fantastic. Larissa, jump in and tell us about your role at Ziebart and the things you're going to be able to share based on that today at our seminar.
Hi, thank you. Thank you again for including me, Robin, and the Franchisor Forum. It's truly a pleasure to be here. My name is Larisa Walega. I'm the Chief Growth Officer with Ziebart International Corporation. We are the largest and oldest automotive aftercare franchise, 400 locations in 37 countries. Our goal is to keep and bring that new car feeling back into millions of drivers' lives around the world. I, again, serve in this capacity where franchise development, marketing, and a lot of annual planning fall under my responsibility. So it's a great opportunity to share today a little bit specifically on the franchise development and, of course, any other places that we help franchise owners achieve that Glee status within their ownership.
I love that. So just again, to remind everyone, the purpose of this particular session is to help us as franchisors and help our franchisees really understand the emotional and business dynamics of those new franchisees, find some common recruitment pitfalls, learn how to set clear expectations, and discover how creating that engaging onboarding experience that leads to long-term franchisee success. And we really tried to pick from 3 different social subject matter experts, someone on the franchise development side. Larissa mentioned she shares a lot of executive responsibilities, but also is chief development officer, onboarding and training specialist. Jason brings that great experience, and then a brand leader, Clarissa, now taking on 2 brands. So maybe with that, I'll open it up and ask you, Larissa, tell me about where does it start in terms of setting the expectations for reality versus holding on to that Glee stage with the franchisee?
Yeah, thank you, Robin. I think it definitely starts with obviously finding and attracting the right candidate, making sure that you understand, and I'll blend some marketing principles into here too, but understanding who your target candidate is and really who they're not. We can talk all day about demographics and all of the net worths and everything that they need to have, but when it really boils down to it, also, what is their emotional connection to your brand? What are their wants and their needs and their whys as to where they would want to sustain a long relationship with your brand too? So our goal obviously is inspiring really in that belief and then building that trust in our system from the very start from a franchise development candidate standpoint. I think we do that through a number of different things. One of them being telling our brand story very clearly so that they can emotionally connect to the opportunity. Typically, almost everyone is a car enthusiast at some point who is interested in Ziebart. If that's not somewhat in your DNA, and it doesn't mean you crank on cars in your driveway every weekend, but you have some affinity to cars, that's good because that's what you're going to be doing every single day. So we think through, those kind of psychographics and opportunities. And then we sort of help them throughout the process, make sure and validate that those are realities through profiling tools. We utilize Zoracle. We talk about transparency in our FDD in terms of the item 19. We want to make sure that they understand those opportunities. So I could go on and on and on, but I'll pause there to say I think it really begins with the right candidate.
I wish we could bottle that, right? The day they leave Discovery Day, when they're so excited, if we could just bottle that up that day and then sprinkle a little more on them in a year or 2. And Jason, you really lead into the operations and the onboarding experience. How do you see that, what Larissa just alluded to, how does that carry through with onboarding? How has your brand and your experience leaned into that idea and been able to successfully achieve it over the years?
Yeah, well, Dairy Queen is 85 years old this year, and certainly we don't struggle with emotional connections with our brand. And most people who approach us are interested in being with a Dairy Queen. They already have that joy, that glee in their hearts, ready to get their time started with us. So the things that are really important to us are continuing on that after franchisee selection, that continuous communication through each stage. When you're dealing with maybe building a Dairy Queen, this might be a year and a half or so because we're dealing with real estate, buildings, etc. So that timeline can be extended. It's really important that we keep in constant contact with the franchisee over and over and over on a regular cadence on different meeting topics, keeping them engaged and really thinking about what their Dairy Queen is going to look like. How do we bring that glee with them? How do we bring it to life in the training and the onboarding through really detailed and structured orientation processes? It is the most important step I think we have in our organization is that quality orientation.
I love that. And I want to segue from that to Clarissa because one thing that we chatted about in the lead up to this webinar was about setting expectations very early as it relates to core values. Tell us what you mean by that.
Yeah, thank you. So what I do, I actually present our core values. It's, I think, the 4th slide in our Discovery Day presentation. And in going through the 2 I really, really like to emphasize is being proactive and accountability. And I emphasize with the being proactive that and I love saying this, we're literally 10 minutes into our Discovery Day, and I say we will make mistakes. We as the franchisor will make mistakes, but we will be accountable. We'll be proactive in what we do, go out and I describe all the different ways that we're proactive, and then say, when you're proactive and you're moving fast, that we have issues where we will make those mistakes. So it's about accountability. So get that out there and saying it, letting, and that we're all human. Then I emphasize accountability on their end, that the core value for them as business owners is that they're accountable for running and growing their business. So, and then we emphasize in those core values, especially during the whole onboarding process.
I love that transparency up front as the franchisor, instead of setting up this dynamic that they're a Z and you're a Zor and we've got the answers. You're actually saying up front, hey, we're going to fail. And I think that's such an important message. And I think when we chat with our employees and our team members and franchisees as well, we always say our core values are aspirational. And if we could live up to every one of them all day long, every day, we wouldn't need core values, right? Because they're goalposts and guiding posts. But I think that's such a great way to kick off your discovery day. Jason, why don't you weigh in for us? Tell us a little bit about, because you're on the operations side. So Clarissa's taken them from this amazing discovery day, and she's talked about core values, and she's said how that ties into her accountability and their accountability. There's a piece of Discovery Day that's always going to be sales, but you have to have that alignment between sales and operations. How do you successfully marry those two ideas?
Well, it certainly is an opportunity in lots of organizations. One of the things that we've done to try to avoid that gap is I'm part of most of those discussions in the early stages. As in my role of opening these new restaurants and supporting overall franchisee success, I'm part of those discussions really early on. So when a franchisee is qualified, we start having those discussions right away. So sales and operations are in it to win it together from the beginning, so that we're all speaking the same language. There is no divide between the communication. And for us, that even translates to far past opening. So when we're doing, structured business reviews after we've gotten through the rattle of the opening and everything settles down, we're doing structured business reviews that include training professionals, that include development representatives, that when we're looking at their business more holistically, particularly if it's an existing franchisee who says, hey, I want another one. I want to continue to grow. We're all in the room together, so there's no misunderstanding about where your current operation is, what are the things you need to do to get to the next restaurant, but it really does rely on that communication between operations and sales so that we minimize that gap. There's always going to be a gap, but we want to make it as small as we can.
I love that. And I think for emerging brands starting out, if you cement that so early on in the process, bring those two verticals so that there is just no space between them, that's so critical. Now, Larissa, on the other hand, you are working with this legacy brand that has been around for so many years. So how do you handle this cutover to operations from sales, keeping all that excitement and glee going with the franchisees?
Yeah, I think that one of the bigger pieces to remember at the start of it is, and I think both Clarissa and Jason have said this already too, but it's about making sure that everyone in your system is connected to this franchise owner's goals. What drives them? Why did they come in the first place? Because that's a part of keeping that excitement and that relationship going. So as we're talking about in that very crucial, we talked in this conversation before about that sort of new store startup or onboarding process, keeping their goals, keeping their excitement, keeping those couple bullet points of passion always at the top of a conversation and at the end of the conversation is crucial. So as soon as they sign with us, it is a very warm handoff call. Obviously, franchise development does not go away because the relationship was there and built and are always there to talk, but it's really about now moving forward in the process against getting that store up and running and started. And so it's a warm handoff with the entire field support team. I call it anyway, the triad of love that Ziebart gives them with product support and specialists, sales and operations support, and then of course, marketing support as well. But it always, those teams build and grow and meet weekly, if not talking to them daily about getting that store up and running just as quickly as possible, but efficiently and correctly so we can have a wonderful grand opening. But I cannot stress enough how much we've learned. And we're very honest about this. Yes, we've had 65 years of great experience in franchising, but we're always optimizing and always tweaking that opportunity to bring it back to their goals and their passions so that we can celebrate every little step, because that new store opening process can be a very long and daunting step.
That is so intriguing. And what you said about always trying to keep it fresh leads right into what I wanted to ask Clarissa about, because Clarissa, you've really taken a leadership role in the industry with some technology that you've introduced. How are you using technology to stay connected with these franchise owners? Because you have the same thing. You have this pretty lengthy runway until the store is actually open and operational.
Yeah, so what we do is with our we call it our implementation team. They own the franchisees all the way up until about a month after their opening, and then they're transitioned to a franchise business coach. But in the meantime, as soon as they're onboarded, we engage with them on all of the franchisee communications, obviously. So we announce them at our Zoom meetings. We do town hall meetings once a week. But also we've rolled out an AI tool called Cassidy AI. And what's really cool about that is it is a knowledge base. So they can go in and query it, and it uses AI to get the reference material. Plus, it also helps them with writing content, all the great things that all of you know that AI can do. So it's really been interesting. The other thing that we do in related to technology, we just are in the final phases of repurposing all of our training content. And we've started to, while the implementation team is working on opening and all of that stuff, they're also going into our training portal and accomplishing training that has all the content's been redone using AI. So it's all very fresh, new, relevant to keep them engaged, because I think that's the key thing to not let new people, and I know Jason, and both you and Larissa, you know, we want to keep them excited about the brand while sometimes they get caught in my contractor didn't show up today. We want to keep them elevated and in that Glee stage by feeding them all the positivity.
So important. And Jason, you said in our pre-work on this webinar that it can take up to 1.5 years with Dairy Queen. But you mentioned that you're doing you have a regular meeting cadence, and you're kind of doing the same thing that Clarissa is to a certain extent. Some of that's live and face-to-face to keep people engaged and connect them with others, and even maybe some mentorship. Tell us about that.
Yeah, definitely keeping that engagement alive is really important. So there are lots of things to learn and know about the restaurant business. And so depending upon the franchisee's experience level, we might be teaching them some basics about restaurants. We might also be teaching them some advanced techniques of how to manage labor or improve food costs really early on in the processes, taking them through the training. There are lots of things you need to train on about how to run a restaurant before you have a restaurant. So we do have in-depth immersive training programs that franchisees participate in, hiring their management staff, which also participates in those trainings, at least monthly check-ins with construction, training, operations, and the other support functions, bringing them along. So it's like it's project management 101. It's making sure things are getting done as they should, but the tone and the content of the meeting is ever evolving. What's next? And continue to pull them along, keeping them really engaged. The construction process, the hiring process can be really daunting for franchisees. And so providing them with the right level of support and keeping their eye on the prize, even in those difficult times where your contractor didn't show up or I can't lay my parking lot because it's February, there are lots of things that can pop up that can get them discouraged. And remember, this is a large investment for a lot of people. We want to make sure that they're staying focused on returning on that investment.
Right. And so it's project management, but Larissa, it's also relationship management over a period of months, right?
Yes, I would completely agree with that and say too that the emotional part about it is something that we've really taken a step back and looking at how we can achieve that. And one thing that I'm excited about, we really turned our focus to. I mean, look, again, we're a 65-year-old brand, but it's changing all the time, right? Franchise candidate needs, their opportunities are growing, changing, and always evolving. And that's what we want to change and grow and evolve with too. So one thing that's really important to us is building that community. And I think that ties in a little bit with Jason and the mentorship too, is building that franchise owner community. As a legacy brand, and I'm sure Jason can attest to this as well too, we've got a very interesting split of ownership. I'll call it where they're at in their ownership journey right now. I have some franchise owners that have been with our system for 40 plus years. So that's one set, right? That's there. Then I've got almost another third that's, we'll say, 20 to 30 or even 15 to 30. And then I've got, for us, we'll say, are the newbies that are 10 years and younger, who are just ready to renew their license agreement. So we've found that really taking a step back and looking at how we build that community for those franchise owners is crucial. And how lucky are we, right, for our new franchise owners to be able to talk to these amazing, most of them multi-unit owners at this point with 40 plus years of experience. So making those connections, like we said, through annual conferences, through monthly roundtables, through even when we can't talk virtually or in face to face, making sure we put the communications out there for the community. Hey, let's celebrate so and so. He just won local detailer of his community, or he is the fastest growing franchise owner from this channel of trade. Let's help them celebrate those wins, because I think that celebration is so key, right? They came into this with this passion of being an entrepreneur. We've got to make sure not only are we giving them the tools and resources and support, but we're celebrating them too.
I love that. And I do want to remind everybody the chat is wide open. We would love for some of your questions to come into play, that we could chat with some of these amazing participants today, our panelists. So feel free to jump in that chat and share anything with us that you have questions about, questions and answers, any of those. But I do have one now for the group I want to throw out there. Do you have any personal strategies that are helping you keep owners optimistic, engaged, and with the long-term vision for the brand for these new franchisees? Everyone's nodding. Let's see. Larissa, I see you nodding first, so jump in there. What's a personal strategy? I'll share one someone shared with me. Not actually, this takes me back to the days of Clubhouse when the women in franchising on Clubhouse. But someone shared, and I've actually adopted this as a strategy. I don't have a very long commute. I only have about a 15-minute commute. But this person was in operations, the executive team, and shared that on her commute, because she had a little bit of a longer one, she had a list of franchisees and she just rotated through them. And she made sure she called a franchisee in the morning and the afternoon, because sometimes that car time is, we're not doing anything very effective anyway. So I've adopted that as a strategy, and I think it could be a great strategy, especially for a newbie, right? Not just our established franchisees, but the newbies that are excited and gleeful. But you're right, Jason, they can't get the parking lot paved, and they can't get a certificate of occupancy yet. But just for the CEO or the leadership team to say, I'm on my drive and I just want to know how things are going. Don't tell me about the construction. Tell me about you. What's happening? Tell me a little bit about what's going on. So there's one strategy. Anyone else want to jump in with one? Clarissa?
Yeah, I
Larissa?
think you're absolutely right talking about celebrating people. And Larissa, I really like that comment. What we do is in our weekly town hall meetings, we really try to emphasize the franchisee, a new opening, somebody who just signed on, then of course, keeping the excitement up with awards that we're getting recognition for a franchisee that has gotten some PR, really getting that momentum so that they continue to be real excited about the next step where they're thinking, oh man, I can't wait to open to get on my PR coverage and my local channel, just really emphasizing the positivity through those times. So, and Larissa, you had some feedback as well, I believe.
Yeah, thank you. And I think those are wonderful ideas. I got my pen handy because I learned at all these things too. From my standpoint, I implemented a thank you system. So I personally write thank you cards for being a part of our system when somebody reaches their milestone anniversary, really each year. I like that. I think it adds just a different touch and personality that, we're thankful for their partnership, and that's truly what it is. But I also have, along with our chief operating officer, we have we'll call it 2 regions in the United States. We each take one for half of the year and then we reverse them. And so we're making just as many calls as we possibly can directly connected to that franchise owner to bring it back again to what are their goals? How is it going? Where are there speed bumps in the process that you're not achieving that goal? How can I talk through it with you? And then also arm our team to then really help you through reaching those goals, moving past those hurdles, jumping over them really, but always making it a very personable call. So I definitely try to get to each owner just as much as I can. And then we flip and we start them over. But that really makes sure that, you hear all the time up at the top, they're not in the stores every day. They're not seeing what I'm seeing. We're trying to stay connected along with field visits as much as we can.
Great feedback. Again, I want to encourage everyone to put their questions in the question and answer or in the chat. We would love to hear from you. I just want to ask about, are you matching these new franchisees with existing franchisees off the bat to try to get some form of mentorship going where there's someone that they feel a little better calling not just operations, but someone in the brand that's going to be a friend? So do we have them buddied up so they can phone a friend? Larissa, you're nodding. Is that a yes?
It's something that is actually on our strategic plan for this year to grow through. But what we're talking about right now is it's kind of naturally happening all the way back to the validation stage. So when they're going in that process of diving in, learning more about the brand, talking to our franchise owners, it seems to be that those relationships happen naturally right there. And so when they're signing and they're going through that, we'll call it our new store kind of startup ramp up process, they've built those relationships so much in validation that it's kind of organically happening. So I look forward to hearing what Clarissa and Jason are doing as we decide if we want to formalize it or not. But especially in this Glee process, we're grateful that our current franchise owners are really, starting off these strong kind of emotional relationships and being very honest about, where there's opportunities for them.
Again, we are more like you, Larissa. We're a little bit more informal. We are looking at peer groups. That's one of our objectives that we have for this year. And then also the implementation team, if they see that there's a personality type or a market that is really similar to an existing franchisee's market, we do a little matchmaking to say, your interest in doing X is very similar to so-and-so out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Would you mind? I'm going to see if I can do an introduction and get that conversation going. The other thing that we are doing, and because our Franchise Advisory Council brought it up earlier in the year, they wanted to have more FaceTime with their peers, and also more FaceTime with the executive team. So we're doing once a month, we call it Recharge and Reconnect sessions, where me, our CMO, and 2 franchise business coaches are going out and inviting anybody from any part of the country can come, but we're trying to make it centric. So it's no more than a 3-hour drive. So we can cover some of the state, and it includes, of course, newbies, and that's where they learn a lot, start to make those connections.
That's great advice. Jason, we have a question from Whitney. She wants to know, what does the Dairy Queen post-opening normalization process look like? On-site visits, Zoom, to ensure that they do not lose that Glee post-opening when, and this is true, right? They and their teams are in the heat of the operations, and that's when, the ice cream machine's going to go down and the HVAC is going to fail and everything that can go wrong will go wrong. So what's your advice or what's your feedback for Whitney?
Yeah. Luckily, Dairy Queen invests heavily in our new revenue streams with new restaurants, and my team and I are dedicated to new restaurants. So one of the things we do is we're there. So we're right there with the team members. We're right there with the franchisees during the training stages, during the opening stages. We'll be there for a few weeks, once we open the doors. But then we'll also be back a minimum of once a month to visit with the franchisee, to conduct business reviews, but also talk to them as much as you can. It really is about a continuous communication, because most of us have been in those situations where an opening and it is a bit chaotic, and it's great because people love your product, but it can be overwhelming. And so we find one of the best ways to alleviate that is to be there. Also to have them before we get there, talk to other franchisees. I think Clarissa mentioned that, which is a really important point, that you need somebody to pair them with. You need somebody who's been through it, so they can also hear some of those stories and also know that there's a lot of light at the end of that tunnel. It's going to be tough, but hey, the good news is they love you. That's why they're here. So lots of positivity to try to drive it, but also we're there.
Great response. And someone said this build out is frustrating. How do I prevent, and it says one from poisoning the others, but I guess if someone's having a bad build out experience, how do you keep that from permeating the organization and spreading? Because that's true. One bad apple, bad news will get halfway around the world before you can, get the good news out there.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, it's not just one person who's going to have a frustrating build out. There are a few. So I think again, I'll pick from Clarissa, and what I was thinking is you gotta pair them with somebody. There is no shortage of people who have been frustrated during a build out, and so helping them understand not only the support from the company that we provide through construction, architecture, and design support, but also other franchisees who have been through it. Typically these are regional things where things are a little dragging, and we also maintain a really tight list of recommended GCs that they should use for those things. So helping them see that they're not the only one. We have prepared for these things. You're going to be okay. Here's how we're going to move forward. It really does. It is an emotional connection. It is a calming effect. It is reassuring them that everything's going to be okay. We've been doing this a long time. You're in good hands.
It's kind of strikes me that the very person who's an ideal franchise candidate is someone who follows systems and appreciates consistency. And they are also the person who's going to be less well adapted to the chaos of opening, right? And having to deal with the delays and the unexpected things that are coming up. So it really is important to be attuned to that personality and plugged in. Have another question. How important is the FBC's personality in shaping the culture of a region and moving the needle? Wow, that's good. We haven't even talked about franchise business consultants. So are they doing some heavy lifting early on? Clarissa, how about for you? Or does that
Yeah,
come later?
really good, interesting. And I'm sure it's very different than what Jason and Larissa do. We don't have franchise business coaches set up by region. Pros and cons with all of that. But one of the pros is that there are times, and I think this goes back to that very specific question, when we have a personality disconnect. And we can say, this is not, and we try, we have 4 business coaches and a director of franchise success. And she also takes a few of locations. So we could have a franchisee that is very much a process oriented, way down to the details. And maybe we've aligned them with our franchise business coach that is really more emphasis on the sales part of running your business. And they're just not speaking the same language. So then we can reassign that franchisee to the business coach that really, really will work best with that franchisee. So that's an advantage when you have, when your system is a mid-size, that you do have that flexibility to kind of shift people around to make sure that we're aligning the right personality types, because it can go sideways pretty quickly.
And I think post-COVID, now that so many more meetings are held by Zoom, it's easier to do that than even maybe 6 or 7 years ago. And that feeds into Lindsay's question. She wants to know whether anyone's using personality tests or assessments to help guide the relationship and communication with the Z's for the duration of their journey. Are you systematically measuring and evaluating characteristics, patterns of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors? This is a long question that make up an individual's personality. And how does that change your approach to keeping them in the Glee phase longer? And of course, she calls out the Myers-Briggs test, MBTI, the Big Five personality test, etc. So are you living on your instincts, or are you actually testing these franchisees and then applying based on that the right fit, as you just referred to it, Clarissa? And maybe I'll throw that to Larissa first.
Yeah, I think there's two angles to look at this, right? So from, again, going back to the dev side, on the candidate side, we do use Zoracle. It's fairly new for us. So we're actually in the Glee stage of our Zoracle relationship
There you
where,
go.
I know, right? We found it very interesting. I'm really excited about this from the marketing geek standpoint of the first step of that is identifying in your current franchise owners, right? Who is that kind of model based on all the franchise owners you currently have. So we're in that phase right now of finding that out and then applying that to our franchise development process and having candidates sort of take that opportunity to understand who they are. On the franchise owner side, this may not necessarily be what they were asking, but I think it's very important and you can get to a lot of those same questions. But we annually and for several years do the franchise business review survey. And what I love about it is, one, it sets those key components of this relationship up to measure those on an ongoing basis. It gives us a place to step back as a leadership team and say, there's a disconnect here. We really need to focus on this piece to increase engagement and satisfaction. But what I love also the most about it is as you grow trust and continue to be, very honest about what's happening in your system, you get more franchise owners who fill that survey out and they are not anonymous. They are putting their name on there. And that's what's really very humbling and exciting to see is when they feel so strongly connected to you and trust you that they will go ahead and fill that out with their name. And you're often getting a lot of that feedback that this person asked in that question about personality, about their goals that they're achieving versus their goals that they're not, and how your team can align with them helping to achieve those goals.
That's great. So I'm gonna take a quick pause here just to remind everybody of a couple things. One, if you enjoy this content from the Franchisor Forum, you have ideas and you would like to participate with the Franchisor Forum, go to our page on LinkedIn, and I'm gonna ask our wonderful assistant from IFA who's here helping us today, if she wouldn't mind, Lauren, would you find the link and throw it into the chat for everyone? And then secondly, I want to play an audio segment. This is a fictional franchisee and their business coach. And then we are really going to ask the groups. Now, we originally thought we were going to do this in breakouts, but we're going to do it a little bit differently because, we're franchising people, so we know how to just make it game day every day. So I'm going to play this and fictional conversation, and then I want folks to chime in with their thoughts on what went right or what went wrong. So I'm going to hit play and hope everyone can hear.
I feel a bit stuck here. When I first signed up, the Fran Dev team promised I'd have hands-on support every step of the way. But right now, I feel like I'm just kind of out here on my own. No one's really guiding me through what I should be doing next. What happened to all that support they promised?
I totally understand where you're coming from, Sarah. It's not uncommon for new franchisees to feel like there's a gap between the promises made during the sales process and what actually happens once you're in the trenches. A lot of times, expectations get a little misaligned, especially when the excitement and optimism of the initial stages wear off. But here's the good news. You're not alone in this. It's all part of the learning process, and we can definitely get things back on track.
I mean, I thought I'd have more direction by now, especially with the training and onboarding. How do I fix this? I look around and everyone else seems to have it together. Even that guy I went through training with seems to know what he's doing.
The hands-on support you were promised is definitely still there, but it may not always be in the way you initially envisioned. The support we offer comes in different formats. We have online tools and resources, your system process book, as well as the ongoing check-ins with your coach. Other parts of it can be more about guidance during key milestones like setting up, marketing, and establishing your operations. It's really about tapping into those resources at the right time. Let's set up a clear roadmap and schedule regular check-ins so you're never in the dark about what's coming up. The second thing I would say is don't look around to compare yourself to others yet. That's not fair to you. You are very early in your journey, and everybody's looks different.
Okay, that makes sense. I guess I just needed to hear it a bit differently. I'll make sure to reach out more often and stay connected with everyone. Thanks for walking me through this. It makes me feel so much better.
You got it, Sarah. Remember, part of the process is adjusting to the rhythm of your new business and finding the support systems that work best for you. You're doing great, and together we'll make sure this thing takes off the right way. Let's schedule our next call to review where you are and set the next steps.
Okay, so I saw the chat light up, which was very exciting. So Diane, I loved your comment. No, you don't understand, coach. I had a nickel for every franchisee that says, but in my market, it's different. Love that. Zoracle, someone says, yes, that's a great tool. Yeah, he did some things really right in there, right? Regular check-ins. What did you think about that comment? Clarissa, I'll start with you. What did you think about that comment when he said, don't compare yourself to others? Good advice?
I think that's good advice. However, I would say putting a little bit more context around that. Every situation has its nuances, and you may be comparing yourself to so-and-so who went through training, but maybe their issue was, their brother was their contractor. Let's make sure that we are being thoughtful in how we are looking at why it's not necessarily easy to say just don't compare yourselves to others, because every situation is unique.
Yeah, great feedback. Jason, how about you? What went right and wrong in that conversation?
I think the thing that stood out to me just personally was the response to the gentleman's response is the support might not be what you expected in the same forms. I think that, in our business, it is very hands-on, and I would seek to try to emphasize those things that we will do and re-emphasize the commitments we've made to the franchisee. I do think that comparing yourself to others is a challenge because everyone has a different journey and everyone took a different path to where they are today. And as a franchisor, it's our job to help try to smooth that path out, whatever it might be. So definitely, I think there's more to learn there.
Love that. And I also want to make sure, that you keep lighting up that chat, guys, because I'm sure that you have other thoughts and questions on this. Larissa, how about you? One thing that struck me that I did think was so important, because we talk about franchising, you're in business by yourself, but for yourself, but never by yourself. And it was important. He said, you're not alone. And I think that's an important message for those new franchisees to keep them in that Glee stage. What were your takeaways from the audio?
Yeah, I agree with you. Actually, I wrote that down too, that whole idea of those two words, not alone. I think, reestablishing what the support is, where it is, who can kind of help with that, I think is crucial. I also wrote down that the thing I loved about that call was that their feelings were validated. It was right off the bat, right? It wasn't that idea of, well, you're wrong, or, you're being too emotional or anything like that. It was validating. Look, these are your feelings. They are valid. Let's talk through them. Let's, again, talk about the support, set expectations, but then also let's hold both of us accountable and let's set next steps, always at the end of every conversation. Let's set the next step. You'll do this, I'll do this, and let's put it on the calendar so we have a place and time to do that.
And I
Yeah.
want to add one other comment. I think the one thing that I think it's important, because when you say support, that is subjective. My view of support could be different from Jason's view. So what does support look like to you? Because the expectation may be, for some reason, I thought you were going to be visiting with me every 3 weeks. Well, we never said that during franchise in the development process. Okay, that may be the disconnect. So let's do a reset on what support looks like for you. I think we've all had some franchisees that follow it. They show up on every call. They do exactly what you say. They're fantastic. And then we have other franchisees
Where
that
did you find those franchisees?
and then we have the other franchisees that are busy, they don't show up on time or whatever, and then they say, I'm not getting the support that I'm getting. So what does support look like? I think is a real good question to ask in that situation.
I think you hit on a
Yeah,
really important point there, and that's engagement, right?
Yep.
The level of franchisee engagement really has a tremendous amount to do with their level of success. Franchisees, it's important to set the expectation up front that this is a very close relationship in order to drive your business to success, and it requires both parties to understand each other, set expectations, and also communicate really clearly.
Yes, so, so true. Building that trust in the early days too, I think as a linchpin to keeping the Glee alive, because once the trust is broken, gaining that back is just such an uphill climb. So just making sure that it's built very early on. And I think those check-ins, the coaching, the accountability, all of those things help. Well, I'm looking to our chat to see, someone said they really liked the rhythm of a new business. That was a good point. And setting next steps. Let's go back again, waiting for folks to weigh in on the chat. We want to hear from you. Next time around, when we run this group, we are going to split you all off into different round tables so that you can have those discussions there, come back and really highlight what you learned there. But I guess just overall, if you think about expectation versus reality, what can cause that disconnect between sales and the operational reality? We talked about time, the time of construction, kind of the pain of construction. But is there also a point that should be made that sales and operations have to be on the same page? Sales can't just promise all unicorns and fairy tales. Larissa, you're nodding so wisely there. I want to get your take because you're our franchise development officer here. So tell us your thoughts.
Well, and it's interesting too, because my experience started in the field and then was so focused on marketing, which was after the sale. So as I've now, really stepped into the beginning of the journey of a franchise owner, I can see where making sure that the franchise development team in the sales process is always kept up to speed on how training, how operational support, how programs, how things have evolved. And they don't need like a full knowledge, but a good base knowledge of what that value brings to their candidates and not over promising, right? So if they understand what that value is, not only through, it's not just about marketing, right? It's about everything that this franchise owner is about to come into. But if they don't understand what's new, what's innovative, right? Our candidates want to see constant innovation of our brands. If that person doesn't have a clear and general understanding of that, I could naturally see how overpromising could happen if they simply just didn't know perhaps that something changed or don't understand the current value and what that holds to top line and then ultimately bottom line revenue for that franchise owner or their candidate. So I think keeping education and communication within your system is just as important too.
I think that's actually a great point, and I'm curious, does anyone send their franchise business consultants, like you send them through the full training, but and I'm sure that you do, but keeping them updated because so many things are changing. And Clarissa mentioned AI. It's easy to get in there and rework training now, but we've got to keep them on the same page, sales on the same page, and not just bring them in, train them 1 year and think that they're kind of one and done because life is evolving and training is evolving quickly. I had someone ask in the chat for the name of the book. That book is Greg Nathan's book, The E Factor. And look at Clarissa. She is a boss there. She is actually even put the Amazon link in there while she was, and no commissions received, by the way, while she was also serving at the same time on our panel. We're about 3 minutes away. Could I ask each of our panelists to take maybe 30, 45 seconds and just kind of sum up what is that franchisee-franchisor relationship? What's at the crux of that? Kind of the underlying factor. And Jason, let me start with you.
Yeah, it's a shared vision. So it is a proven system that drives success, and it's really about pairing the right people with those businesses. It's 100% the difference between a successful, in our business, restaurant and one that struggles is around the quality and the quantity of the leadership that's provided, and those are selected by our franchisees. And so it is a shared vision of success. I think really is to sum up that relationship. It's shared.
I love that. Clarissa?
Yeah, and I'm gonna kind of take off from your point. One thing that we also do in Discovery Day is we explain franchising. That it's a system, then we deploy new initiatives, and then the key thing is we get feedback from the franchisees that then goes back, and then we do go through the whole process again, so it's consistently refined. For example, that new initiative that we did may look completely different from the feedback from the franchisees. And also just that mutual respect is so important.
Love that. All right. Larissa, you're going to bring us home with these last few words.
I would say that it's a shared passion for teamwork that helps each of us build a legacy.
Ah, love that. So you can tell Larissa came from marketing, so she can always soundbite it all for us. It's 12:59. We will always be respectful of your time. Just a couple of reminders. We were graciously joined by Emma Dickinson. Emma is the vice chair of the Franchisor Forum and will be helping with all of this content all through the year. We would love your feedback. Please shoot me a quick note or email. As a resource for attendees, we have a quick article on franchisees' expectations versus reality, and I'll try to summarize the key points of this webinar and publish them. Please do join us on LinkedIn. Just look up IFA Franchisor Forum. To our amazing panelists, Clarissa, Jason, and Larissa, thank you so much for all the advice you shared today. And for those of you who joined us on the webinar, we know that an hour of your time is precious. We hope that you learned and took away some great nuggets of information that will help all of us continue to promote and enhance this great business model that we're associated with. And with that, I'll close this out because it's straight up 1 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.